Would it be fair to say that the only reason that you habitually use drugs and alcohol was because you were trying to fix a feeling? James Hadlock joins us to tell his story and about the mission of Blunovus. He tells about his history of wearing a backpack of shame, running away, addiction, and a psychotic break, eventually leading to jail time. 25% of Americans live with a diagnosable mental illness. 80% of those will never ask for help. Blunovus is a proactive employee assistance program embraced by employers like EMI Healthcare, Divvy, and Purple Mattress. He talks about making mental health a positive discussion in the workplace and why a no tolerance substance policy is failing employees and employers. Enjoy. Welcome to the Illuminate Recovery podcast. We shed light on mental health issues, mental illness, and addiction recovery. Ways to cope, manage, and inspire. Beyond the self-care we will discuss, you may need the help of a licensed professional. My name's Kurt Neider. I'm a husband, a father, entrepreneur, a handyman, and a student of life. I avoid conflict, I deflect with humor, and I'm fascinated by the human experience.
And I'm Shelley Mangum. I am a clinical mental health counselor, and my favorite role of all times is grandma. I am a seeker of truth, and I feel like life should be approached with tremendous curiosity.
I ask the dumb questions.
I fill in the gaps.
Today is an exciting day. We have James Hadlock with us. James is with Blunovus. James is the founder and instigator of Blunovus. And James, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Shelley. It's great to see you again. Gosh, I was thinking it's been a while since we've been in the same room. I mean, it's been a long while.
It's been super long, and your wife Alicia too. I miss her too, right? I mean, I love you guys. You're so much fun, and you got so much energy. And every now and then, I just need a little pick me up. So I think I need James and Alicia. I need them to pick me up.
Oh my gosh! Well, it's a delight to be here, and Kurt, it's good to meet you too. I know that we haven't met before, but I'm really excited to share a little time with both of you today.
My pleasure. I've done my share of internet snooping, so it'll be interesting to hear the real story, right? not the unadulterated James version. So.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
Well, James, tell us a little bit. Give us a little background, our listeners, a little bit of background of kind of where you come from and how you ended up where you're at now.
Yeah, I know that we all have our own path and our own journey, and it's really interesting as I reflect back on my career. I'm going to turn 52 years old this year, and as a kid growing up, I had all these aspirations and dreams, and I mean, I was gonna light the world on fire in a good way, and I wanted to, even from a very early age, I wanted to have an impact. I remember having a conversation in my late teens or early 20s and talking with my dad, and I was looking at, do I want to go into medicine or do I want to, go into some other profession? And I looked at finance and, just like we all do, right? We're exploring. And I remember having a moment with my dad just going, there was something inside of me where I wanted to be a part of something that could impact a lot of people. And honestly, I don't know if that was driven by ego. I'm totally open to admitting that maybe it was. But, if I go a little bit deeper, I think there was a part of me that truly, sincerely wanted to do some good in the world. And little did I know that my path would be completely different than what I had set out. And so, when I was in my mid-20s, I became, and I caught that entrepreneurial bug. And so I owned a chain of carpet cleaning companies in the state that I grew up. I grew up in Idaho. And, man, I had a knack for marketing and being able to drive sales and business. And then I got that itch of wanting to do more and do more and do more, and ended up here in Utah. So I've been here in Utah now for 26 years, maybe almost 27. And I sold all of my carpet cleaning companies, came here to make my millions, so to speak, and wouldn't you know it, within about 4 or 5 years, I was able to accomplish that, where I was able to be a part of some companies and set up manufacturing in China. I was traveling all over the world. Like, I was living this jet setter lifestyle. And from the outside looking in, it would appear that I was on this fast track of mega success. And I was married at the time. I had 2 little daughters. But I also was carrying around this backpack of guilt and shame and insecurity and a ton of stress and overwhelm. And it was something that I managed for a while. And I managed a lot of that through being an overachiever and being a workaholic. And then I don't know exactly when that time was, but there was a incident in my life that many people would relate to trauma. I lost my uncle, who was closer to being like a brother than an uncle. He died in a pretty nasty car accident, and I was called to go and see his body. Totally unexpected. I didn't know that he had passed. And oh my gosh, I did not know how to process that. And I was already kind of on the edge of wanting to figure out better ways to manage all of the stress and overwhelm. And within just a couple of months, I was abusing pharmaceutical medications, so a lot of muscle relaxants, painkillers. And within 6 months, I had gone from completely being abstinent from all kinds of substances to now I was out drinking every night, and I was abusing GHB, which at the time was, this big club drug. And it wasn't too long after that I ended up leaving my wife and 2 daughters. They eventually ended up back in Idaho, and it was a whirlwind. Like, within a year, I was, in and out of the hospital for overdoses. Like, I didn't have a turn-off button. For me, because it happened, relatively quickly for me to go from being a successful entrepreneur to now in complete crisis and survival mode.
So where did that end? What was rock bottom for you?
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, here's a twist to the story. I ended up taking a company that was on the brink of bankruptcy, doing about $2 million a year, and within 18 months we were doing over $20 million a year. So I became one of the fastest growing companies and entrepreneurs in the state. So, little twist, right? But I think that goes to that place of, usually we hear about, I lost everything. And by the way, that's coming in a minute. But there was this time where even at my highest rates of use and overdoses and in and out of rehab and in and out of the psych ward, I was still able to maintain some level of success for a while. And the reason I want to bring that up is because oftentimes, we've got every excuse in the world to not take a look.
But in order to do that, this is on and off. You've compartmentalized enough that in the morning you get up and you show up to the office and you're hustling, and the second you walk out the door, it's where am I going? Where's the next fix?
That's exactly right. And so I was able to maintain that for just a couple of years, and then the wheels came off. There's only so much you can put in different silos, and then and to your point, I was writing checks for $250,000 and throwing money around like I was a rock star or a rapper, and next thing you know, I'm completely, like, the millions of dollars are gone, and I'm in this mode. The business is not doing very well. Big surprise, right? And what ended up happening is over a period of about a decade, I found myself on and off the streets. I found myself bouncing from couch to couch. I found myself just doing little jobs here and there. I mean, it got ugly. And then 13 and a half years ago, I had tried to get, I was being offered this huge job from a huge company, a multi-billion-dollar company, to run a division for them because I had a pretty good track record for success in the business world. And I went to 17 interviews in Wisconsin where they were just blown away per what they told me. And the CEO sat me down and said, "You are the guy we've been looking for. We're going to make this offer." And it was a big offer. I mean, it was a $300,000 base, and yeah, I mean, more benefits than I had ever even known. And I got back home, and then all of a sudden, just all that guilt and shame just came weighing down. And I wrote them a big long email and confessed that I had had some struggles in the past, but at the time I was in a really good place. And I don't know if that influenced them. In fact, they ended up having me fly down and meet with the regional sales, whatever. And we had a good heart-to-heart. And I felt confident. He felt confident. They said, "We're still going to offer you the job." And then about 2 weeks later, they did an about-face, and I didn't get it. And there was a huge lesson for me in that. I had been sober for about 9 to 10 months, and that was that moment where I'm like, oh yeah, I am worthless. I am the piece of crap that I always thought I was, and rejection was just so tough for me to handle, which is why I became such a good sales guy. Because I didn't want, having a no, and I took it so personally that I would do everything I possibly could to get a yes, which is a scary proposition when you go to the lengths that I did to get those yeses. And so that rejection, I immediately started to drink, and then I had a psychotic break. I mean, I was literally paranoid. I was hiding in the closet, thinking people were after me, like the whole gamut. So it wasn't just substance use disorder. It was mental illness. I full on was borderline schizophrenic. And I ended up going and meeting a friend and grabbing some GHB, which I hadn't done in years. And then about 3 hours later, I found myself on the ground with about 50 police officers in Springville, Utah. And I had no recollection of any of it. Like, you want to talk scary, like zero recollection. I don't remember one thing. And apparently it was, top news story on all the channels, some guy going 20 miles an hour down the freeway for miles and miles and miles. And I thought that was it. I thought I was going to prison. I was telling myself all these stories. A friend of mine decided to bail me out, and I put a plan together that I was going to end my life, that I was done. And I ended up in a hotel. And during that time in that hotel, I was convinced that I was nothing, that I had failed everybody, including myself and all my potential. And as I'm getting ready to complete a suicide, I've got the TV on, and Michael Bublé, of all people, who he is, the singer. Mm-hmm. He's being interviewed, and he's talking about how he was able to navigate the years and years and years of failure of being a singer. I don't know if you know this, but he was a wedding singer and a lounge singer for like 7+ years before he made his big break. And somehow my ear catches this, and I remember him talking about he always felt like he had a purpose, that this is what he was supposed to do. And his parents and his grandfather never gave up on him, like they were his biggest fans. And something in what he said woke me up just enough, and I called my mom. And it was so interesting to go from a place of complete and utter despair that I didn't want to live again to actually pick up the phone. And maybe just as beautiful as my mom heard that, and they were still living in Idaho. I was in Midvale in one of the, dirtiest, nastiest hotels you can imagine. And she came down and grabbed me, And over about a 2-week period, I got really quiet with myself. And I started to ask questions like, how did Mr. Overachiever Entrepreneur get to this place? So I was just really being curious with myself. And one of the first things I noticed is that overachieving top sales, top entrepreneur was running away from something the same way that the drug using liar, cheater, stiller, fill in the blank, that I've been running away from something the whole time. And these were just different ways to manage those. One of them I got a lot of pats on the back, the other one not so much. But I think it's important to note here that I think a lot of people believe that addiction is a problem, and I would say it's just a really bad solution to an underlying something, right? That most people would say is a problem. And I tend to like to ask a lot of people who are in recovery, early recovery, long-term recovery, and I've asked them this question again and again and again, and I've always got the same answer, and that is, would it be fair to say that the only reason that you habitually used drugs and alcohol was because you were trying to fix a feeling? And I've always gotten a yes. I've never, ever, not once, ever had anyone tell me, no, that's not right. And that was kind of the first insight I had, is that I was running away from something. And then, the obvious next question was, well, what in the heck are you running from, dude? And what I came to understand in that 2-week period at my mom and dad's house was there was some foundational belief system that I had bought into, that I would never amount to anything, that I would never be good enough, that I would never be worthy of love. And I had made this association that the only way people even accepted me or liked me is if I could produce something for them. So the deal, it was all performance based. So literally my entire life was based on performance, which is a really crappy way to live your life. Because newsflash, we all fail. Like, we all go through stuff.
Oh my goodness, isn't that the truth? I'm listening to you talk about, sitting with yourself and being curious and asking some of those deep questions. But the question that arises as you talk about that is, how did you learn how to do that? How did you even know to do that?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. And it really speaks to what I've come to understand today in a lot of the work that I do. When I do some of my executive coaching with people, there seems to me that there is, and a lot of people will call it God or universe or, the energy behind life, but there seems to be this deeper intelligence, behind everything. And in the addiction world, a lot of people will refer to it as a higher power. And frankly, I don't care what people call it. I want everyone to recognize that, when was the last time you had to worry about figuring out how to beat your heart or to breathe in air? Like, there is some innate things that are just built into the system. And I'm going to tell you, as noisy as my head was at the time, I got to a point where I had run out of thinking, and there had to have been enough space in my life that some of that deeper intelligence just kind of came through. Whether I intentionally tuned into it or I was just ready for it, or, I tend to think that maybe I just kind of gave up on everything, and all of a sudden there was, it's kind of like tuning into radio stations. I think I was always turning the dial, and then all of a sudden, boom, without me even knowing, that signal came through, and it really was, I didn't even think about it. It was just, I automatically was curious. So, but I think we can leverage that too, which is probably something we ought to talk about in a little bit. But it just occurred to me in that moment of just asking myself some bigger questions, some really reflective questions. And And what's interesting is once I came to understand that I was running away from something, and then I understood that I had always felt like I was unworthy of love and that I had to earn it and I had to show up a certain way, then the most beautiful insight just came up, and it was from this question that occurred to me, and it was, well, James, buddy, if you are so unlovable, then how in the world are your parents right now with you? Like, you are the most destitute and the most, like, you're at the lowest of lows. Who are they loving then if not you? And I'm telling you, it was like somebody turned on a light switch in my life, and instantly I knew that I was lovable, that I was worthy of love, and I knew that I would never use drugs and alcohol again in my life. Like, I just knew in that instant, like, it was, somebody had turned on the light. It was like I was walking around this room that was completely blacked out with furniture and all kinds of stuff on the floor, and I was just trying to work my way through it, and then somebody turned on the light, and I'm like, oh, that's where the sofa is. No wonder I keep bumping into something there. It opened me up to an entirely new world that, by the way, my wisdom also said, that's probably not something you ought to share with a whole lot of people, because you've said that before. I mean, I had been to rehab and I had relapsed, multiple times, more times than I can count, which points me back to, I think we get so caught up in being tactical around substance abuse, but we forget that the real power comes from being able to see it from the inside out, from what I like to call an insight, because here's the thing, my parents told me my whole life. I mean, they showed up to all my baseball games, they were super supportive, but I just couldn't see it. I didn't believe it, and it needed to land differently, and it had to come from within me rather than it being reinforced outside of me.
Well, and I think it's so interesting because you're not alone in this, James. You're not the only one that's, that just can't see their value, or that recognizes or believes that their only value is what they can produce. Because I don't know, there seems to be a theme out there, leastwise among the people that I work with, that, they have to give something in order to have any value. And I've even gone through my own recognition of, oh my gosh, look how loved I am. And I didn't even recognize how much I was, right? So these can't be unusual stories, but incredible. But, as I listen to people tell their stories, the one thing that seems universal so far is there's these pivotal moments in their lives that change everything.
Yeah, I had a mentor tell me that when these kind of things happen, it's like, is nothing has changed, but everything is different. And then everything changes. And that is exactly what's happened. Like, I was facing a court case. I had no money. I mean, I was broke. I was borrowing a car. Like, literally none of my circumstances had changed. But I remember writing, in a notebook that I literally could see a new twinkle in my eye. Like, there was something that had opened up or lit up within me. And I have to go back to the Michael Bublé experience, because even in my darkest days of habitual using, I always felt like I was going to get through it. But it was one of those where I never shared it with anyone, but there was something inside of me. And I also knew that that I would want to work in purpose, that I would want to feel like I was contributing in a meaningful way for me. Like, and I believe we can do that in really any profession and do anything. But I just knew that I wanted to make sure that I was aligned with something that mattered to me.
Incredible story. I'm still letting it settle. Of all of this hard that you've come up to, you're facing charges, and everything is different. Everything looks different. It's like you've had a paradigm shift within yourself, and you can now see out and see light and see something different of yourself. So what's the rest of the story? What happens from there?
Yeah, and what a great transition. So something inside of me told me, do not fight the court case. And it took them like 6 months before they actually charged me, because there was a lot that went on there, I'll just say. And I just kept getting, I was destitute, so I actually got appointed an attorney who's since become someone I just adore. And I stay in touch with him from time to time. But the sense and the feeling I got was, don't fight it, don't fight it, don't fight it. So I didn't. Here's the funny thing though. That feeling of don't fighting it, I kind of ran with that and thought, oh, something's going to happen, and I'm not going to have to do this or blah, blah, blah. So I had all these stories going on. But what's interesting, it took more than 18 months to get through the system. And they had offered me mental health court, because it was in Utah County and they have mental health court. And I just kept getting accountability. You get to own this, dude. And even though it would have been easy and that would have been a nice little off, I refused, and I decided to go through the system. And what was interesting, at the time I was working with the mayor of Provo City. I was already, because it took so long to get through the system, I had already become this community member. I was working with USERA. I was like the model citizen, not because I felt I needed to be. That's just kind of where I was at. And I had since met my wife. We were married. We just had our first son together. He was like 6 weeks old, and I'm standing in front of the judge. I've got like 17 recommendation letters from some of the, from presidents of colleges, and you name it. Like, I was Mr. Model Citizen. And the judge looks at me and he goes, I don't think you've learned your lesson. I don't think you know, the ramifications of this. 100 days in jail. Boom. Next thing you know, I'm carted off to jail. My wife is in the stands with our little baby, and her jaw's dropping, my jaw's dropping, and I'm going to tell you this. One of the most beautiful experiences of my entire life, to get to be in jail for 100 days from a place of way more awareness than what I was used to. I became I taught everybody meditation in there. I taught everyone on how to kind of, get a little bit quieter inside. I ended up working in the kitchen, which gave me all kinds of privileges. So I lived in a barrack instead of a 6x8 cell for like 90 of those 100 days. I actually came back with a tan because we had these huge gardens that I got to go work out in. Like, it wasn't easy from the aspect of being away from my family for 100 days, but I got to learn how to be present and in the now, because it was scary for me. I was in with gang members, and I was just this humble little kid from Idaho that had never gotten in real trouble, and here I was in the midst of a lot of habitual people who habitually were committing crimes. And so it allowed for me to almost accelerate my learning curve on accepting what was, living in the now, like all that stuff. It was kind of like going on a meditation retreat for 3 months. Honestly, it was amazing and scary and tough, like all of that, all grouped into one.
I'm listening to you talk about being in jail and like you're on the fast track, right? You're like, you've already decided that you've got something to offer, and here you are offering it to everybody. And I'm thinking that, I'm listening to the scary piece, because you're not the only one that I've talked to that's been in jail going, this is a scary place, and you got to be really careful or you're going to end up, hurt. And then you're meditating in there, and your whole world is different, even though that's where you're sitting. Oh, I don't even know the question to ask, but tell me more.
It's interesting to me that where you come from, this like performance-based perception where all of your self-worth is based on what you are doing or have done, right? And we're getting to a place where it has to be more of who I am, right? I'm just lovable no matter of who I am. I have to let go of what's accomplished. It's interesting to me that you go through this court case and your attitude is, I need to just own it, right? I need to take responsibility for what I've done. It's interesting to me to kind of consider the idea of if you had been let off, right? If you had taken an easier way out, would that in itself been a form of failure, right? Would that have been a form of, I cheated the system, right? And having gone through this, I stood square with my shoulders, right? I did what the judge told me to do. I did my 100 days. Is that also still a form of really performance-based action, right? Where you're now saying, hey, I've accomplished this, but it's an honest accomplishment, right? It's a real, authentic, I'm owning who I am. I'm paying, my kind of, whatever they call that to society. And now that gives you this freedom to move forward as you. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I appreciate the thought behind the question, because there was a piece of me, even as I'm walking in jail, and even those first maybe 72 hours, where like, I'm better than everyone else in here. Which is funny, because I had such a sense of inadequacy and insecurity, which always is accompanied, right, by the ego trying to overcompensate in that. So I'm going to tell you what, I have no idea what it would have looked like and where I'd be today without those 100 days, but I would never, ever take it back. It was so hard, like being hard for my wife and all of my kids and our new little baby, and thinking about what's my wife going to do, and I was the primary breadwinner of the home, and all that stuff was coming up, and I could have gone the other way. By the way, I could have gone I'm the biggest piece of crap when I get out of here, and I came out with so much, like, not made up. I wasn't like making a list of gratitude. Like I was living in gratitude from a place that was so deep and organic, and it was like boot camp for me on this transformation that just has continued over the last 13 and a half years. But it was a fast track. There is no question. Like, there were days where, I remember how unsettling it was when the dogs came in, because when you live in the barracks, here's the other side of that. You get a little bit more freedom, but they're also checking everything because it's easier to sneak stuff in, because people are going to work release jobs and those type of things. And so we were getting shaken down, if you know what that, have you heard that term before? Like literally they're dumping everything out, and I'm having anxiety attacks because I was, part of this was also letting go of all that control that I had. I grew up a really nice childhood. I made a lot of money at a very early age. I was totally spoiled. Didn't think I was, but I was used to being in complete and utter control of everything in my world. And this was the ultimate opportunity to let go, to accept what was, to roll with it. And like I said, it was beautiful. I just genuinely, I have never want to go there again, by the way. Let me just state that. But I genuinely, I have such a sweet, soft place for that time there. Like, I could go on and on and on about the lessons and the things that I was able to let go and release because of that experience.
So speaking of lessons, you talked about, you had your Michael Bublé moment, right? Your 2 weeks at home with mom, and nothing changed, but everything was different. Is that it? Now, James is a new James, and it's just squeaky clean from then on? Or, what are the actual daily lessons, right? What are the things you do every day to keep where you are, to keep from going back there?
Yeah, well, and it has a lot to do with the company that my wife and I co-founded back in 2017. We had been in the behavioral health space. I was fascinated, first of all, with my own transformation, because that's, even though we've heard of other people that have had these type of transformations, it doesn't seem to be the most prevalent way that people talk about sobriety. And I was fascinated with that because I had been told I'm going to be on medication my whole life for mental illness. I'm going to struggle day to day with a substance use disorder. And none of that in 13 and a half years has happened with me. So I got very curious about my own personal transformation. And what I came to understand was, oh yeah, like I can speak to it from the neuroscience. I can speak to it from all kinds of different philosophies. And so I became a student of my own experience, frankly, because I'm like, I wonder how many other people, because listen, my drug dealers were afraid of me. Like I was that out of control. So I wonder if there'd be some people interested in being able to transform their entire life to the way that I was able to in my own life. And so I wanted to model that. And the funny story is it took me several years to really have a grasp of what had happened. And that's been an odyssey. I mean, my wife and I have done retreats and trainings. We've worked with professional athletes and CEOs and executives. But back in 2017, we had this aha moment, and we were working in the behavioral health space, which is where I met Shelley originally. And, you know, we had seen so many people that were in crisis, that just like I had been, right? And a lot of them were business professionals, and every single time we talked to a business professional, they would have this sense of hesitation of, you mean I got to tell my work, or what is my work going to say? And that's when we have this aha moment of, gosh, you know, we're working so downstream in the behavioral health space. What if we started to work upstream? What if we took the conversation to the one place nobody wants to have the conversation? What if we went into the corporate space and we started to talk about mental illness and substance abuse like we talk about diabetes and obesity and health and wellness? Like, what if we did that? And so that was kind of the vision. And what we found is that it's an interesting story. You know, there are currently today 25% of the population live with a mental illness, a diagnosable mental illness. 25%, 1 in 4. But, you know, I think that's just part of the story. I think the other part of the story is 4 out of 4 struggle from time to time. Like, we all get upset and overwhelmed and freaked out and reactive to life. And if you don't believe me, look at the last year and a half with the pandemic, right? And so my wife and I, we didn't just want to have an awareness campaign, although that's important. We wanted to create actionable solutions that companies could utilize to not only help their people, but to also change the culture around how we see mental illness and substance use disorders in the workplace. Because here's the most devastating stat that I can share with you. 80% of all the people that live with mental illness and 90% of all the people that live with a substance use disorder will never, ever reach out and get the help that they need. Ever. So you're working in the treatment space, you're treating at most 10% of the people who need it. Think of any other disease or issue in the world that we are in today, and imagine if you were only treating 10% of those who actually needed it.
Yeah, 10% of those who have diabetes and the rest would die. Or, 10% of, you think about it, heart disease. And if we don't ever treat that, those people will die.
Well, and the way that we address substance use disorders and mental illness in the workplace is very similar to if somebody decided not to brush their teeth, not to floss, and to wait until they needed a root canal before they went into the dentist. That's how we treat mental illness and substance abuse in this country. And
well, like an example of that would be, let's say that you have an accident, right? A physical accident, a car accident, or whatever it is. What's the first thing you have to do, right? Straight to a drug test, right? It's not just that there are perceived stigmas, there are actual requirements that make it difficult to have this be something that you deal with and make your employer aware of.
It's embedded in the culture and it's embedded in the policies of our organizations. Have you ever heard of the no tolerance policy?
No.
That most companies have? Well, let me ask you this. If you have a no tolerance policy, what are the odds if I fall into innocently, like James Hadlock did, where you innocently are just self-medicating because you're not sleeping, you're freaked out, blah, 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 blah. Am I going to go to my work to get help, or am I going to hide it until I just can't hide it anymore, and then my entire life is in chaos, and then you know what happens? I get fired. So we can talk about it from a morality standpoint. I like to talk about it from a ROI or a VOI, a value on investment or a return on investment perspective, because the numbers will just blow people away. I mean, Deloitte came out last year and said for every $1 that we will invest proactively in mental health and substance abuse programs, preventative, $5 ROI in absenteeism, presenteeism, emergency room visits, the list goes on and on. Like, where can you get that kind of return on investment with your company and your employees? 5 to 1?
Well, and it's hard too, right? Because even, it's hard to believe, but it's even harder to track if you're an individual company, right? Like that's a challenging one to actually trust, right? And we've seen these programs on the physical fitness side, right? Some of that style of health. What does this program look like for a company?
Yeah, so specifically with Blunovus, we take a multifaceted approach. So we have an emotional support platform. So we have a call center. We have an app. So when we onboard a company, they download the app. That app gives them one-touch access to call into the call center, to text into the call center, and then to access a myriad of resources that we can provide outside of even that call center. So that emotional support service is available 24/7 to all of our employer groups and their employees and loved ones. And we wanted to eliminate some of that friction. And so they can call in, they can text in. Guess what? 65 to 70% of engagements via text. So, maybe there's some EAPs out there now that you can text into, but when we started back in 2017, nobody had a text messaging feature. But that's just common sense to me. Like, how many people feel so scared that they don't even want to pick up the phone, but they might text you? So we looked at this from the viewpoint of how do we reduce the stigma and the friction points both at the same time. So you can text in, you can call in, you do it through an app, so you don't even have to remember the phone number. The other thing is that with our system, and because we do it through the app, people are assigned a phone number, so you can remain anonymous. We don't even need to know who you are, and we can still help you because we know you're calling from Purple Mattress or Divvy FinTech or whoever one of our clients is. So that anonymity, 30% of the people that use our service, we never know who they are. So if that doesn't speak loud and clear about stigma, which is, by the way, stigma and job concern are the two reasons that people will not seek help. It's not cost, it's not insurance, it's not a lack of services, it's stigma and job concern. So our call center is there to do three things, and then I'll tell you about the other side and really the difference maker of what we're doing today. But in that call center, we really have a job to do three things. Number one is to connect. We want to make sure that you feel heard, that you know that you matter, and that there's hope. Well, gosh, that sounds exciting, and that sounds inviting. And guess what? Guess what I was looking for? Guess what everybody who is struggling is looking for? Guess what every human being wants? They want to know they matter, they want to feel heard, and they want to know that there's hope in their life. So to us, it's not even about mental illness or substance abuse. It's about being human. The second thing we do is we'll do some coaching in the care center. Most of that is more through self-reflection. So we take that, Shelley, what I learned back 13 and a half years ago, and we prompt people. So when they ask us, I just got in a fight with my husband, I don't even know what to do. Well, what are some of the things that you've done in the past that have worked for you, right? We put it back on them. We don't take that from them. We kindly support them into seeing those answers for themselves. And then the third one is we become a concierge service. So we partner with therapeutic communities, with different providers, therapists, counseling centers, rehab centers, and we use those resources, those third-party networks, to match them up. So we're really the bridge between the two. So our whole thing was we wanted to solve the 80 and the 90% who never get help. We wanted to solve that. That was our number one thing. We wanted to solve that one, and that is by making it easier for people to and giving them a great experience. But the other thing, which brings me to the second one, there's another stat that was really interesting to me, and that is 87% of leaders will never receive any kind of training as it relates to mental health first aid, psychological safety, signs and symptoms of what to look for if somebody might be struggling. 87%. And frankly, I think that number is too low. And I'll tell you why. A couple of I want to say about a month and a half ago, I was the keynote at the Utah Worksite Wellness Conference here in Utah. First time I've been able to speak in person in a year. And we got about 150 people in the room and then another 100 that were streaming it live. And I shared that stat, 87% of leaders will never receive any kind of training. And then I asked by raise of hands, how many of you out there, and these were all HR professionals, wellness professionals, how many of you out there have your companies that have either in the past or are currently providing any kind of training as it relates to mental health? Guess how many hands out of 150 went up? None. You got it. Zero. Seriously, my jaw dropped. I mean, I could not, I had this, I was just like, are you kidding me? So it speaks to the second thing that we do here at Blunovus, and we have invested heavily. We have our own learning management system and provide a library of trainings and resources, and then provide specifically leadership and manager trainings around all the things that I mentioned. How do you create psychological safety in the workplace? How do you identify the signs and symptoms of somebody who might be struggling? How do you provide mental health first aid? And most importantly, how do you get your managers to partner with Blunovus in a way that your managers literally become the number one referral source at your company as to why your employees reached into the care center? And let me tell you, I mentioned Purple, and there's a reason for that. Purple caught the vision of this with us a year ago. Do you guys know who they are, the big mattress company?
Yeah.
They're a phenomenal organization, and they were looking to up their game as it related to the emotional well-being of their employees. So they partnered with Blunovus, and they wanted white glove service all the way around, and they pushed us, and we started to look at different solutions on how could we literally transform the culture of an organization. And what they've come to us and said is, Blunovus isn't a vendor, Blunovus is a partner, and you literally have helped us transform the culture of our organization. And here's how I know that's true. The number one reason employees call in to our call center, because a manager invited them to.
Yeah.
If that's not the most beautiful thing. Now, and the reason is because they either noticed something or they have utilized the skills that we have taught them on how to be better listeners, on how to just make themselves available to their staff, to see them as people and not just as a cog in the wheel. And it is converted into extremely high. We have about a 10x in engagement and utilization than a typical employee assistance program does nationwide. Like, I don't know anyone who even comes as close to what we're doing in creating that engagement, but it's because we didn't look at it from the status quo. We looked at it from the ground up of how do you change the conversation in an organization to get them to make mental health and everything that's about it, to make it a priority and weaved into the culture and even into their policies. So we recommend a right to work policy when it comes to their drug policy. Do you guys know what that means?
Say more.
Nope. It literally means if they are performing their job, no problem. Now, some would say, oh my gosh, that's like the wild, wild west. And I'm telling you, I'm just telling you, people are hiding it. It's not, there is a no tolerance drug policy is not stopping anyone from using. And so it's helping change the mindset of going, now, we don't recommend you just, hey, change your policy to a fit to work policy. Change it and then change the culture to support that with managers that make and leaders that make themselves available. So here's the thing, you can't just do one and not the other. Like, they go hand in hand, right? You've got to have the outlet, you've got to have the training, and you've got to match it with the policy. That's what will change culture. And I think that's what's been missing in leadership trainings for forever, is we have not taken into account the mental health of our employees.
Yeah, no tolerance to right to work. That shift goes, it's a shift from me versus you to us, right? And from kind of this fear-based leadership to kind of a hope-based leadership. We're in this together. How do you draw the line on that? Because with a lot of professions and a lot of jobs, there's huge increased amount of risk that comes with that, because it's not just are you hitting your objectives, there's a lot of are you putting other people in harm's way. How do you differentiate that?
Yeah, there are some professions where we would not recommend a fit to work or right to work policy simply because of risk, but what we would do is we would still have them reword it in a way where it's not a no tolerance. Like, there is some buffer area there to be able to work with them. Like, you come to us, but again, if you're not matching it with the culture, like it's that whole, do what I say, not what I do. You've got to live this. I mean, and so one of our initial trainings that we do with all managers is around what I like to call the art of innate listening. So we teach, how funny, like Mr. Talker here, Mr. Keynote Speaker, I teach people how to listen more effectively. But it is so powerful when you can just be with someone without saying anything, much like what the two of you have done today. Like, you have given me this platform to let me share, right? Just and let it flow. And that is such a beautiful gift that you can give someone. And so we teach managers on how to be present and to be curious and to be more open. So what's interesting about the art of innate listening is when you can start to just be with people and be present and be more curious about what's going on rather than thinking you know what's going on, and allow yourself to be open, and you listen for insight rather than information, people are going to experience a connection with you, and the benefit, it builds trust. And when you build trust, guess who they're going to come to when they feel out of sorts? Like, yeah. To me, it's super logical, and it's got so many benefits, not just for mental health, but it can change everything in an organization.
Well, it can change everything in a life, because when you think about, most of us have to work just to survive, and most of us are spending an awful lot of time at work, doing what we do, and that becomes sometimes our primary family, if not our secondary family. And when you create a culture where you can be safe, where you can come and say, show up however you are, or you can come in and know that you can come talk to your manager or your supervisor, and you can say, look, I'm really struggling today and I need some help. Well, I mean, that's a deal changer. That changes not just that person's life to know that they've been heard, that somebody's listening to them, and that they have a safe place, but it changes the trajectory of their illness too, and of their healing and recovery, and it makes it exponential how they can recover because somebody cares, and they know somebody cares because they showed them.
Yeah, it comes down to, I think we talk a really great game in the workplace around being more compassionate and humanizing, but where does it really count? And where it counts is, Utah. I'm going to talk Utah for just a minute here because that's where I'm at. We lead the nation in depression, and that's by hard data. That's by prescriptions and everything that goes along. So that's hard data, and we're number 5 by last count. I know that jumps from 5 to 8, but number 5 in suicide in all the United States. So when yeah, and again, those stats jump because there's a couple back and forth. My point of that though is we have to do different. I mean, there is no, and honestly, what we've seen through the pandemic, as stressful as it has been, it shined a light on people's mental health and on these issues in a way where I think people are now starting, it's no different than when all the sexual harassment cases were going on, and then all of a sudden sexual harassment training was required, right, with a lot of companies. So that there is a silver lining in the respect of, one, companies can't ignore it any longer. Like, even from a crisis perspective, they can't. Number 2, and this is maybe the best news of all, most employees are now demanding a more robust mental health benefit when they're looking for jobs.
Mm.
So that's exciting. I mean, we have grown in the last year. We've quadrupled in size as a company with nothing but that picking up steam. And Kurt, I want to go back to something on the analytics. So we've had this discussion. We consider ourselves an analytics company as well. So we track a lot of data, and we have started to partner with even some of the healthcare carriers to start tracking the hard stuff, like emergency room visits, opioid prescriptions, and seeing if we can take that information and create trainings and videos and education to be more proactive. So if I go back to my metaphor of waiting, not brushing my teeth, not taking care of myself until I need a root canal, what Blunovus is doing in the workplace is we're teaching companies how to brush their teeth every day. That's it. And here's the good news. It's not a heavy lift. As soon as you can see it, it really is, it's incredible. Like our partners are raving fans because they're actually hearing from their employees about their experiences. So, we're helping them open that conversation, but more importantly, we're able to support people proactively and upstream. And then in the event that they need treatment, then we're able to also help them navigate that in a beautiful, very respectful, easy way.
I think it's really amazing what you do and how you're out there in the industry and in the world of work, right? The workspace. And my head goes back to you telling your story of being in jail, and some of these guys that you're in jail with, and some of their history and what they do. And I can see them sitting here listening to this conversation going, yeah, right, James. You're talking about guys that are in your league. You're talking about people that have an affluent life or that had opportunities that I didn't have. Is this for the guy that's been, lived a good share of his life in jail or in prison and didn't have that support as a kid? Is this for the same? Is it for them the same as it is for everyone else?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to what I see that is innate in all of us. And what I see is it doesn't matter what your past was. It doesn't matter what opportunities you had or didn't have. I see that there is this energy behind life that as we open up to that and we don't get so caught up in our heads. See, the problem is that most of us, we have this belief system thinking we're a certain way and I can only have this kind of a life, and the moment you can see where your experience really comes from, and notice that it has nothing to do with your circumstances, and we're living our lives moment to moment to moment, from the inside out, and we're experiencing that through what I call the thought-feeling relationship. It opens you up to, I mean, listen, when I got out of jail, I couldn't have got a job at McDonald's, you guys. Like, I may have had some skill sets from the past, but I really could have let that get me down and go, and yeah, there was a struggle. Like, I feel it. I know it. This program, I mean, we help not only the employees of these organizations, we help all their loved ones, which includes people who have no insurance, who have been habitually in and out of jail. So our program is for any and everyone. And then in particular, the work I do outside of Blunovus, with whether it's my retreats or my courses or my trainings, like I'm a champion for, like, in my heart of hearts, I'm a champion for the underdog. Like, I still have close friends that I was in jail with that have been habitually in and out of jail their whole life. Their dad was teaching them how to cook meth when they were 13. So to me, and call this the optimist in me, but I think it's deeper than that. I see we all have the birthright of living in mental health and healthy, productive lives. We just don't think we do.
I could not agree more. And I love that you use that word birthright. We're born to it, but we got to be able to believe it. It reminds me, we just had a conversation with Todd Sylvester. I don't know if you know who Todd Sylvester is, right? He's amazing.
Yeah.
And he, he's very much about belief, and he kind of shared some of those very same ideas, is that it really is about believing it. And if you get one other person that sits across from you is willing to listen and believe in you, that can sometimes change everything.
Well, and I would suggest, I have noticed in my own life, I think there's something deeper than belief. I really do. Because I'm going to tell you, I had a knowingness that I would never use again 13 and a half years ago. I couldn't explain it. I actually felt very hesitant, as I shared, for years, that I would not even utter that. It's just, I think there is something beautiful underneath even the belief systems and the thinking that provides us with even a deeper knowingness of who we are. And that's where that insight lives. That new wisdom, that deeper wisdom that comes through. So just something that I would throw out there that I think is interesting to explore.
I love it. And I don't think that those systems, right, that belief system and that feeling system and our neurological pathways, I don't think they exist separate from each other. They all intertwine, right? And so if you can change it in one space, regardless of where it is, it starts to impact the rest of them. But I don't disagree with you, because some of the very biggest changes of my life are on a feeling, on a gut knowing, if you want to say, or a spiritual level. And then the belief follows. So I don't disagree with you. And sometimes, as my sister, who's life coaching it, right? And she'll say, no, it's all about your belief system and what you think. And if you change that, it changes everything else. So I don't think we need to get on that, but I agree with you.
That's another podcast. Right?
Yeah, right. That's exactly right. But James, you've talked about some pretty incredible things, and you've shared some ideas that are put into practice are going to change our worlds, our work lives, and then again our families and our communities. And you're so inspiring. What you've done is incredible. People are going to want to get a hold of you. They're going to want to know, how to access your resources and what you've put together. Tell them how to do that. What's the best way?
Yeah, well, if you want to get a hold of me directly, you can find me. I'm pretty active on both LinkedIn and Instagram, a little bit on Twitter, but mostly LinkedIn and Instagram. And it's really simple, just my name, James Hadlock. And then if you want to learn more about our business and Blunovus and our emotional support platform and leadership trainings, that's just at www.blunovus.com, and that's spelled B as in boy, L-U, N as in Nancy, O, V as in Victor, U-S.com.
Perfect, fascinating. You mentioned some pretty cool companies. Shout outs and kudos to those groups for doing that. It'll be exciting to see how this rolls out and see the success that you find from here.
Yeah, thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Shelley. This has been a real pleasure. I appreciate all the work you two are doing too.
Thanks. Well, I'm excited to catch up with you here in another year and see exactly what you've done and how much you've been able to impact lives.
Yeah, thanks, you too.
Okay, thanks, James.